Welcome to the I'm Him Sports Podcast. I am your host, Matthew King. And once again, alongside me is Jake Morris. And we have a very special guest on today to talk about Ravens with the playoffs tomorrow. Very exciting times in Baltimore. We have the divisional round with the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. So I have a great guest, Reeta Hubbard, who is a part of 105.7 The Fan and also has her own podcast called The Gridiron Gals. And Reeta, it is very nice to have you on. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk about Ravens with us.
I want to thank you all so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So my first question for you is the Ravens have, with their fans especially, this has been a conversation that we talked about on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it now. The fans have been very quiet at games for the past couple years. And obviously, I know that you've seen the prices have come down with the game. I think it's like after fees, it's like $95 just to get into a divisional game, which is I think it's the most cost efficient game to go to this weekend. What do you think the issue is with the fans and the attendance lately? Because I remember going back to Ravens games like maybe 6-7 years ago, and it was impossible to either get tickets or it was impossible to hear the person next to you.
Yeah, I think that this is a growing problem in not only here, but the NFL. Tickets are very expensive, and that's just what it's boiling down to. So it's definitely becoming a situation where the people that really want to get loud and cheer, they can't afford to go there. So the people that are at the games now are the people that can afford it, but they don't view a football game as a loud and rowdy environment. They view it kind of like as a classist environment. So that's the conflict, because you do still have people that are PSL owners that have owned their PSLs, since its inception in 1998, and they're the ones that's still getting loud. But then now you have newer people coming in, whether it be they passed down their PSLs or they sold their PSLs to someone, and now they're in a situation where they just, don't feel like they have to be so loud, and that defeats the whole purpose. I really hate that that's where football is kind of trending, where it's becoming unaffordable, and then the people that can afford it are the ones that don't want to do the work. And by doing the work, I'm simply saying clapping and cheering. It ain't hard, you know what I mean? So, I really hate to see that. And again, I don't think it's a Ravens problem. I think it's an NFL problem. Yes, there's some outliers here. Kansas City is, loud. Buffalo is loud. But I'd also argue that if you go to those places, it's probably not as much to do there. So it's a hot ticket.
Right. Yeah, for sure. At least from when I've gone the past couple of times, one of the biggest things, and you talked about, people being able to go, is I hate the thing that I hate the most about going to games now is when you go and then you stand up for your team, and there are, I would say, older people or people that can actually afford tickets, the actual non-real football fans that are there that just want to relax and have, I guess, their own time, like they're watching from the couch. So that's been annoying for the past couple times. But moving on to the actual game on the field. So the Ravens had a bye week. A lot of people were skeptical about the Ravens getting a bye week this time for some reason, even though I believe that it helps the players. And you can see some players coming back from injury, such as, let's say, Zay Flowers. But do you think that rust is a real thing with these players? And do you think that you expect maybe the Ravens to come out flat a little bit with the rust and not playing for essentially 3 weeks?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. And at first, I was one of those people that was a proponent of, well, I wasn't a proponent of it. I will say that if they didn't get the 1 seed, I was like, okay, hey, cool. The momentum continues if they, have to continue to play. Obviously, at the end of the day, the players want the rest. They want to be able to rehabilitate themselves if they're dealing with injuries and try to get themselves healthy. So I do understand that, getting the 1 seed is very important. I think that maybe that's some PTSD in me talking in terms of like, oh, I don't want them to, lose their luster, if they take off, and they've been off for essentially 3 weeks. Well, a lot of the starters anyway. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they come out on offense a little out of sync. I think defensively, you can kind of stay in sync. Offensively, a lot of things are about, timing and, certain and the routes and such. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I also would be surprised if it lingered more than a quarter. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they'll find their way, if they even have a rust issue. I think that they'll find their way relatively quickly to get back into sync. So, yeah, I take it back. I understand the importance of the 1 seed. I think the concern is that, and I'm not comparing this to the 2019 team at all, because I don't even think that
A
that
lot
was
of
a
people like
situation
to
of
do
rust.
that.
Yeah, I think that that's a situation of them overlooking their opponent more than anything, and them not just being, and then also them, in hindsight, that team wasn't as good, right? In terms of what they were doing on offense and what they had on offense. Lamar was just the one that made that go. So I don't think that this is the same thing, but you don't want to get too far behind, because we saw that last week with Cleveland and the Texans. And once you get too far behind, it's kind of hard to reel yourself back in.
Right. Yeah, we had that conversation as well.
Yeah, so I guess just building off of that, what would you say, like more specifically, the Ravens need to do offensively to kind of not have those repeat appearances or repeat playoff appearances for the offense? Like, what do you think specifically they need to do to
I
try to
think it's
avoid that rust, but also just have better offensive performances?
Yeah, I think it's important to establish the run. I do know that the Texans are, better when it comes to run defense, but also too, if you look at the Texans and the games that they either lost or the games that were close, running backs actually were successful against the Texans. So it's a little misconstrued there in terms of like, oh, overall their run defense is good. Okay, that's fine, but that's typically against opponents that they were up pretty big on, or that they weren't in a dog fight with, right? A lot of
Hmm.
times teams that have balance, they tend to have problems with, and which is really weird to me why the Browns were doing what they did last week, because they decided to throw more than twice than they were able to run. And I don't understand the logic behind that, but that's not here nor there, right? The Ravens got to come out and they got to establish the run like they've always done. I think doing that then allows you to have some play action. You can do some rollouts, you can do whatever it is that you need to do to kind of get yourself some time, if some guys, to make sure that everybody is kind of coming out of their routes and being where they're supposed to be. But you can't lose who you are, period. I don't care, if a team is supposed to have, this great run defense. We heard the same thing about Jacksonville, right? Jacksonville was supposed to have this great run defense. They only allowed, so yards a game. And again, that was misconstrued, because based on their opponents, if they were up large, or if they were, not good run teams, then of course that they excelled. So you can't allow the other team to dictate who you are and what it is that you do. And I think that being comfortable with running the ball allows you to kind of just set some things up and be able to move the chains. So I am not on the like coming out throwing the ball like what Cleveland did last week. And look, I know it worked in their favor early because they were going back and forth for a little bit. But this is not the Browns. This is the Ravens. They have their own identity, and balance to me is what's made this team as successful as they've been. So as long as you can establish the run early on, or at least let them know, hey, this is what we're going to be doing all day, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people talked last week about the Browns. It felt like they didn't change any of their game plan to their opponent. And I've seen that swirl around a lot, especially watching film from people that do film breakdowns. Like you can see with the Browns, they didn't change anything about their offense or their defense to fit their opponent. And what the Ravens do really well against opponents is that they cater to who they're playing against. They don't just come out and have the same game plan against everybody. And it felt like Cleveland, came out on defense and on offense and said, hey, we're just going to do what we've been doing all season long. And you can't do that, especially in the playoffs when people have enough film to be able to adjust and be able to know what's coming. So I think Baltimore does a really good job at making sure that they don't at least keep the same offense or defense week after week. Now, one player I do want to talk about that can help the offense this week is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has been a full participant in practice this week, which is a awesome sign. It would be great to have him back, even though I've seen fans say that they don't know if they want Andrews back because Likely has been playing so well. Have you heard anything about Mark Andrews potentially playing this weekend? And if he does, how much of his role would be into this offense with Likely and with him coming off of injury?
So Ian Rappaport reported this morning that it is likely that he will not play, that he will not be active on Saturday. So, unless something changes, I think that we have to prepare as if Mark Andrews is not playing. Let's say that he is playing, though. I don't think that Mark Andrews is just immediately going to take his role back and they're going to put Isaiah Likely on the bench. Mark Andrews is still trying to come back from an injury. And I think that that's important to acknowledge because if he did play, he's probably going to play on a snap count. I'd had to guess that he was probably going to play 20% maybe of snaps. And I also think that he was going to play in situational types of situations, red zone or third and long and something like that. So I don't know why people don't want one of your best weapons on there. And to say that you think that it kind of messes up the chemistry, well, that's saying that you don't trust that Lamar can spread the ball around when Mark Andrews is out there. And I think that that's an unfair statement to say about Lamar when he's done a really good job all year long in doing that. So I don't think that he's going to play. It appears that he's not going to play. Maybe he's trying to get himself ready for if they advance. But I can't wait for the opportunity for Andrews to come back if the Ravens advance and have him and Likely out there in 2 tight end sets. I think that that's something we'll all be looking forward to at this point because Likely has really stepped up and done a great job.
Yeah, 100%. He's definitely filled in very nicely. Obviously, he's not Mark Andrews, but he's stepped in and he's played very well for them. Made some very big plays down the stretch.
Yep.
So kind of touching on something that you mentioned during there about Lamar Jackson not being able to spread the ball out when Mark Andrews isn't playing. Do you feel like Lamar has a lot of pressure on him going into this game just because of playoff performances in the past?
Oh, for sure. I mean, he knows that, his legacy, unfortunately, is tied to his playoff wins because he's probably going to win his second MVP. So he's done that. He's done that on every level. He's won a Heisman Trophy. He's won an MVP already. And so for him, for people to, and look, the goalposts are going to still move regardless if Lamar wins a Super Bowl or not, right? You are going to either love Lamar Jackson and what he does or not consider him a true NFL quarterback. And it's nothing that he can do. But the one thing that he can try to do is to add to his legacy that he's already created. And he knows that winning a Super Bowl does, for many people, change the narrative. So he absolutely knows. I mean, he's talked about this, like, I want to win a Super Bowl. All those individual accolades, that's cool. But I have something bigger. And I definitely think that the pressure is on him. But what I would like to hope is that he doesn't allow the pressure to force him to be antsy, to force him to kind of be out of his game and to kind of do some things just because he's trying to push. Because you have good enough players around you where you don't have to push anymore. There's guys that are going to do with their jobs and they're going to make your job easier. And you don't have to do everything like you probably did in 2019. So I'm looking forward to seeing what 2023/2024 playoff Lamar has in store.
Yeah, for sure. And you touched on it before. There was like a tweet or a video going around of Dan Orlowski saying that Lamar Jackson needs to win a Super Bowl. And a lot of fans got upset about that. But in reality, like, nobody is going to view Lamar Jackson differently until he wins a Super Bowl, which is sad. And that's nobody's fault. That's not Lamar's fault. That's really just the media in general, like holding
Yep.
Lamar to a high standard. It's the same thing as LeBron James. Like, I know that it's hard to compare, but like a lot of people are not going to put LeBron James as their best player of all time until he gets 6 rings, which is a stupid thing in itself. But when you're such a great player, you have to be held to a high standard, which sucks. Like, if Patrick Mahomes didn't win his rings already, there would be conversations about him as well. So it happens to the best quarterbacks. It was talked about with Peyton Manning for a while with
Yep.
his playoff instances where he was not very good in the playoffs too. And I see the same direction for Lamar, and that's okay. But it's just the reality of things. It sucks. But another quarterback who's already had playoff success is CJ Stroud. And he has been phenomenal. In my opinion, he's been a top 5 quarterback this year, which is crazy for a rookie quarterback to do. He seems calm in the pocket. He's just very precise in everything that he does. And also, I give a lot of credit to Bobby Slowick, who should probably get a head coaching job, in my opinion, as well. He's done such a great job at developing CJ and making things easy for him. Now, what does the Baltimore defense have to do, in your opinion, to stop CJ Stroud and to be able to contain him as much as possible? I know they did that in week 1, but once again, these are 2 different teams from 17, 18 weeks ago.
Yeah, and also it's fair to it's fair to acknowledge that they missed 3 starting offensive linemen, I think, in week 1. The Texans did. So now they have some guys, they have those guys back. But you really have to try to make CJ Stroud uncomfortable. You can't let him get too comfortable in that pocket. It's funny because I've been noticing a lot of people kind of watching, I guess, pre-snap situations with the Texans, and apparently like Laramie Tunsil's a little antsy back there, to the point where he should probably get more false start penalties than he does. But then that apparently, they tend to tip off what exactly it is that they're going to do. So you cannot allow him to get comfortable. You have to, I like to say, put footsteps in his mind. You know what I mean? Like, even if it's phantom pressure, but if he's, rattled and not in sync with what he has going on, that's important, because once he gets in a groove, it's no stopping him. You know what I mean? And at that point, it becomes a shootout. And while we absolutely have faith in Lamar Jackson to participate in the shootout and even win one, you just don't want that. You don't want CJ Stroud to get comfortable and feel like he can make all the throws. And so I fully expect Mike Macdonald, who knows CJ Stroud very well. Obviously, he was the defensive coordinator at Michigan when CJ Stroud was at Ohio State. So I'm sure that he has some understanding of what Stroud does well, to come up with that. Another thing that I've seen, that CJ Stroud is very good against zone defenses, which is something that the Ravens do run often. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do a mix of man coverage and zone. Now, I know that people are going to be like, wow, because Marlon is not going to be there. But the good thing is that, Nico Collins is obviously their biggest threat here, because Noah Brown is not going to play. He's out. Now, Schultz obviously is a good tight end, but it's not like that they have a plethora of wide receivers remaining, right? And we know that Nico is their main guy. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see some man coverage mixed in with some zone coverage to kind of confuse him a little bit and to try to make sure that he's not comfortable in terms of throwing the ball downfield. So I'm looking forward to this matchup. It feels like a real chess match, because when you look at the Texans on paper, it's like, wow, they beat down the Browns like that, but their skill players outside of CJ Stroud and Nico Collins are very, okay, but they were able to do it. So this will be fun. This will be a fun matchup.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with all of that. I guess taking a step back a little bit and talking more about Mike Macdonald. So there's been a lot of talk about him getting some head coaching interviews. Obviously had a great year calling the defense for a historically good Ravens defense this year. Have you heard or know anything about Macdonald and his potential future with the Ravens, or could we see him going somewhere else this offseason?
Haven't heard anything. Obviously, then more than what we've all heard is that he's interviewing for jobs. But I would not be surprised if a team decides to pick up on Macdonald. He's a great guy that knows how to run defenses extremely well. And I think that he could be a great head coach. I think that he has all the makings for a good head coach. And also, he has John Harbaugh as his mentor to show him, what it is to do in terms of interviewing. And I'm sure he'll, can rely on Harbs in terms and Jim, because remember, he worked with Jim as well, to, help him in terms of, what it is to be a head coach. I think that he has all the right people in place around him to succeed. I think that he himself is talented enough to be successful in that realm. I'm definitely selfish. I hope he at least stays one more year, because this is an interesting year, right? We don't know if Matabike is going to stay or go. We don't know if Patrick Queen is going to stay or go. And those are two big pieces to this defensive puzzle. So I'm a little selfish in the sense that, if one or both of them are gone, they're going to need somebody that's going to be able to help those guys that are replacing them. So I do wish him the best. I do think that at some point, he's definitely going to be a head coach somewhere, and he deserves the opportunity. But I would be lying to you if I told you I wasn't being selfish and hope he stays one more year.
Please send him down the Beltway to my Washington Commanders. I'd love to.
No, absolutely not.
That is the last place that we want to go to. I would hate to know that he is right down the road.
Oh my God,
that would really hurt. But yeah, speaking of that, with John Harbaugh. So this is a question that we have to talk about. I hate talking about it. We talked about this on our show earlier in the week because Jake was telling me, he was like, well, you need to make sure that you calm yourself and make sure that, there is a possibility that the Ravens lose, and Ravens fans need to realize that there is a true possibility this team can lose a playoff game. In what fashion, we don't know. But with John Harbaugh, if the Ravens lose this game, because we were talking about Mike Macdonald, if the Ravens lose this game as 9.5-point favorites at home, number 1 seed, everything is going their way. If they lose, do you think there is any possibility that the Ravens maybe look for a change in their head coach, in John Harbaugh? Now, Harbaugh has been great. I have defended him for a long time. I think that he's one of the best in football. But you see it now with all of these great head coaches that are getting released or getting fired. With Mike Vrabel, you see it with Bill Belichick, because people are trying to go to an offensive style head coach, or maybe a certain coordinator that they love, a younger head coach. Is there a possibility that Steve Bisciotti says, we've gotten everything that we could get out of Harbaugh. Maybe it's time to change direction and maybe hire Mike Macdonald if the Ravens lose this first game in the playoffs?
It's possible. If I had to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, I'd give it a 3. I think that he'd probably give him another opportunity next year to, solidify or finish what he didn't finish in 2023. But I absolutely think that that's a possibility. And when we should acknowledge that, losing, at home again in a divisional round after being heavy favorites would absolutely warrant at least a conversation. I don't think that it would be executed, not this year, but I do think that he would absolutely start the season in 2024 on the hot seat for sure. So, and look, Harbaugh knows that just as much as we talk about the legacy of Lamar Jackson, we have to talk about the legacy of John Harbaugh too, because yes, I know that he won a Super Bowl in 2013, but he's not won many playoff games. He's not been the head coach of many playoff wins since then, too. 3, right? Because you got the divisional, the 2014 season where they did win. Well, they won 1 playoff game. Now I'm confusing myself. They won 1 playoff game in 2014, and then they won playoff game in 2020. He has 2 playoff wins since going to the Super Bowl. So his legacy is also one that they have to start looking into as well. And look, that's nice that you won a Super Bowl. That was, at this point, 11 years ago. And so that doesn't carry the same weight that it does maybe if it was just 5 years removed. You know what I'm saying? We're over a decade now where you last won a Super Bowl. And I definitely think that would help him if they did not advance in terms of coming back in 2024. but not by much. 2024 would absolutely have to be the year that he would feel like that they would have to chip.
Yeah, no, that's we've talked about that a lot. That just like there's been so many good Ravens teams, and they seem to not be able to pull it together during the playoffs. And it's like, do you look at the head coach? And it seems like a trend now, especially in the NFL, that we're moving on. We're looking for the younger guy. We're looking for the more offensive minded guy. But I guess just kind of wrapping up this whole conversation. We've talked about like there's been this fear of the first round bye because of that 2019 team, but we feel like this team is different. Like, what do you think about this 2023 team that is different from that 2019 team that will be able to get them over that hump and get them that divisional playoff win?
First thing is Lamar has been in the NFL 6 seasons now, so that's the difference, right? Between him just being in his second year as he's finished his regular season 6th year. So there's a lot of maturity that probably has come in those 4 seasons and that led up to this point. Also, the personnel is different, and I mean everything from the actual players on the field to the coordinators that they have. We know that everybody, is very opinionated about Greg Roman, and while I think that Greg Roman was needed for 2019, I think that the lack of evolution over the years from Greg Roman is what held them back, because I do think that there was a place for that type of offense that they implemented, but I don't think that it was a sustainable type of offense, because eventually you have to evolve out of that. And so also, he has better pass catchers. You know what I'm saying? Long gone are the days of, Seth Roberts and Willie Snead and a rookie Marquise Brown. Now you have an Odell Beckham Jr. who's had a Super Bowl ring himself, and Zay Flowers, who's been fantastic in his rookie season, and even Nelson Aguilar, who we've made jokes about Nelson Aguilar dropping footballs in the past, but he's been very solid for this Ravens team. He's been great. And even Isaiah Likely just filling in for Mark Andrews and what he's been able to do. So I think that the personnel is completely different. I think that the guys that they have that's running these scripts and plays are completely different. And so that to me is what makes this different. And I don't think that, they have a nice mix of veterans as well that like won't let them take what they've done for granted. And I go back to the Kyle Van Noy when he's talking to the guys in the locker room. I think it's after the San Francisco game. And he's like, these wins don't come easy. So you got to, yes, celebrate. But there's a bigger thing that we're working on. So you can't sit in this. You can't sit too long and relish in that win, particularly because they had to play Miami 6 days after that. So I definitely think that you have guys that can keep you level-headed and say, this is nice, but we still got more work to do. And Lamar even seems like, that's why we keep hearing locked in. Like, I am so tired of the phrase locked in, but I also understand. I get it. I get why, we're like using that, because Lamar knows that, winning the division, winning the 1 seed, hey, they've been there and done that before. Now they got to do something different. And I think that they're prepared for that.
Right. Yeah. We've seen it a lot. The locked in thing is hilarious because I have never heard that term so much from a team. And I don't know if you know who Jack Settleman is. He even is trying to get the fans to lock in too. He had a tweet that came out that he was like, we need the fans to lock in as much as the players are, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. And like you said, I agree fully. You see it with these veteran players. You saw it with Roquan I think it was Roquan Smith during the San Francisco game when they got a huge lead. He's coming over to the young guys and saying like, hey, calm down. We still got another like quarter of football left, because he knows how it is with the Ravens and the stereotype of them saying like, hey, we get out the big leads and we blow them. Like, so you can tell the differences in the team. They recognize what they've done bad in the past, and they're trying to correct it this season. So I would be fully surprised if the Ravens lose on Saturday. I'm very confident in it. Now I'm going to ask you, what's your prediction for the game? Can I get like a score prediction, or maybe, let me know that the Ravens are going to cover their 9.5 points, just because I have a side bet on that. So I would like to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confident that they can win this too. I just don't think that the Texans have enough weapons to exploit the Ravens on both sides. I love Will Anderson Jr. on their defense. I think Greenlaw is one of their linebackers, or he's been nicked up, I think, dealing with an ankle injury for a while. There's good players, Stingley in the back end, Derek Stingley. And so while they are good football players, I just think that, what this team does offensively and what they have in Lamar Jackson, because that, to me, that's always going to be the X factor here. I remember being nervous about the Dolphins game, and then right before the Dolphins game, I was like, "What am I nervous about? They have Lamar Jackson."
I was the same thing. I was the same way.
And then we know what happened with that. So, to answer your question about the scoring predictions, on the Winning Drive podcast with myself and Cordell Woodland at 105.7 The Fan, we had to do our predictions, and I predicted that the Ravens would cover and that 35-20 would be the final score. Again, while I'm confident that they can win, like, I try not to say these things out loud because we've been there and done that before, right? Like, I don't like to overlook anybody. As much as I think that, Houston is a very good football team and an overachieving football team, I do think that they have more flaws than the Ravens do. So I think that plays into why they'll win this game in that fashion. But I also understand that they go out there and play 60 minutes just like the Ravens do. And so you can't look over them. You have to look at them and then and they have to play them. So I'm sure that the Ravens are not overlooking the Texans at all. There's guys that are keeping it at bay, I'm sure, in that locker room and that coaching staff. But I definitely think that the Ravens will make this a big game, for a statement game for them in the playoffs. And I think that they win by 2 scores.
Awesome. I love to hear that. Hopefully they do cover. I think it's I said this earlier on our show earlier this week. I said that the Ravens have to, I think it's big for them to win in a dominating fashion to get them more confidence. Even if they win by 3 points, I still feel like they'll have that feeling like, God, we didn't play good enough. We have to go into the AFC Championship game against the Bills or the Chiefs. I think winning in a dominating fashion is going to translate over to that AFC Championship, hopefully, for them to reach the Super Bowl. Really quick, I want to, are you okay with playing some Ravens trivia? We do this with all of our guests.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'll start this one off. So which player led the league in touchdown receptions during Baltimore's first season? If you want multiple choice, I have that for you as well.
It's either going to be Derek Alexander or Michael Jackson. I just don't know. Maybe I'll go with Derek Alexander.
You had the right guy. It was Michael Jackson. Derek Alexander was on there as well. I think he came in second that season, but that is a good guess.
Rest in peace, Michael Jackson. Both Michael Jacksons, by the way. the one we know, the King of Pop, and the Ravens, Michael Jackson.
All right, we got the next one for you. Who was the first Ravens player to rush for more than 100 yards in a game? Also has a multiple choice if you'd like to hear some names.
Give me the multiple choice. But my immediate reaction was Priest Holmes, but that's probably not true.
Okay, so I'll give you. So it's either Jamal Lewis, Bam Morris, Ernest Biner, or Priest Holmes.
Bam Morris?
Ernest Biner was actually the correct answer.
I should have known. The man that's in the Ring of Honor.
Hey, so we had a Jaguars guest on here a couple weeks ago, and I gave him some trivia, and it wasn't hard enough, so I made these a little bit tougher. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, give them
but
to
you're
me.
close.
I remember players very, very well. Sometimes, and I can kind of get close into the era of which that the question that you're asking me, but I definitely look in the back of my mind. I was like, it's probably Ernest Biner. I just, I don't really like to acknowledge Ernest Biner, so I think I was purposely sidestepping him.
Just getting that one out.
Yeah.
All right. I think you'll get this one. Who was the first Ravens quarterback to throw for more than 400 yards in a game? You have Joe Flacco, Steve McNair, Vinny Testaverde, or Lamar Jackson.
Oh, Vinny.
Yep.
It got to be because them offense. Look, Vinny and them could score 50 points. They just would give up 52 points. So it's got to be Vinny.
I feel like he holds a lot of the Ravens like first records. So he's usually the pick for quarterback for the first. But yes, it was Vinny Testaverde. He did do it. I feel like a lot of people would go with Joe Flacco. But yes, it was Vinny Testaverde.
I was around during those times, so it's easy
Right.
for me to kind of remember those things because I'm an old lady. So,
All right, for this next one. So I got who caught Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner's first ever interception. So we got Chris McAllister, Ray Lewis, Rod Woodson, or Ed Reed. This one kind of surprised me. I'm not gonna lie.
Ray Lewis.
That is correct.
Ah,
I did
That
not.
one
Out of all those
surprised me a
people on
lot.
that list, yeah, that one surprised me.
Yeah, I would have definitely gone with either Chris McAllister or Ed Reed.
my
But
first
Ray
choice
Lew-
was Chris McAllister, but then I was like, Ray has kind of been around this, the entire time, so it's very possible it was him. So
Yeah, I never knew that Kurt Warner's first interception was even by a Raven. So I found that interesting as well.
I didn't
This
know
one
that
is the
either.
last one, and it is a Ray Lewis question. How many times did Ray Lewis lead the league in tackles? The multiple choice is 6, 4, 7, or 5.
This is a tough one.
7.
It was not. You were close. It was 5, which surprised me too. I thought it would be the most amount.
I thought it was the
in
most for sure.
For sure. So that one caught me off guard. But in all honesty, with these questions, they were tough, but you were around like all of you were picking the closest one to it. So I got to give you props on that because I would have done awful.
I got
in these
40.
ones.
I look 40%, but again, I completely was like, I'm not Ernest Bond. It might be him, but I'm hoping it's not him. I was hoping it was somebody else.
That's fair. But once again, we want to thank you, Reeta. Thank you for joining us on the I'm Him Sports Podcast. We truly appreciate you taking the time and being able to do this. I know it's a crazy week, probably for your podcast and for 105.7 with everything going on. So thank you so much. And I love your content. Go check her out on Twitter. Go check out the Gridiron Gals, which is her podcast. It's awesome. I was watching a lot of it last night, actually. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I truly appreciate it.
I want to thank y'all for having me. I enjoy being on here. So hopefully we'll talk soon after, hopefully the Ravens win the Super Bowl.
God, I hope you're right. You'll be the first person that I contact and bring on here. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you to the audience for joining the I'm Him Sports Podcast. If you guys can, all you have to do below is press subscribe. Super easy. It takes 2 seconds, and hit the like button as well. Thank you guys for watching. And once again, go Ravens.
They know that I'm him, all of this time in the gym. Shots don't never touch the rim. They know that I'm him, got the defense overwhelmed. They know highlights of them. They know that I'm him, don't believe me, check the film. Ayy, any court in any field. Ayy, yeah, I'm Hall of Fame for real. They know that I'm him, all of this time in the gym. Shots don't never touch the rim. They know that I'm him, got the defense overwhelmed. They know highlights of them. They know that I'm him, don't believe me, check the film. Ayy, any court in any field. Ayy, yeah, I'm Hall of Fame for real. They know that I'm him. It's Timothy. Opponents might call me Himothy, aka Mr. Go switch up your energy. I join the team and increase all the chemistry. Wait, the odds playing baseball, I make them head home. I get the football, I'm in the red zone. I'm really him and I'm making it clear, bro. Thinking I'm not RIP